Let's see if we can hear this a little bit better. Yeah. You're an activist because you care. But that very caring about the climate, about your community, also makes you vulnerable in terms of mental health. When things don't go right, when you fight against climate change, but you see nothing changing, when you fight against the far right, but you see that they still win the elections. Right? These are things that can really affect your mental health, and we see that also particularly in a lot of social movements that we see, like Extinction Rebellion, fighting against climate change. We see that a lot with Amnesty International. Also people who often see and witness a lot of things that are potentially traumatic. If you have friends in Ukraine right now, in Gaza, in Lebanon, right? Caring about those issues, speaking out about those issues and witnessing those issues also makes you particularly vulnerable to being affected by that. And that is why we wanted to take some time, the next 40 minutes, to practice two tools that we take from Extinction Rebellion and Amnesty International about taking care of your own mental health and of each other's mental health, and creating a space within your activist community in which you do care about each other and for mental health. My name is Jana Besemuska. I am one of the trainers of the Foundation for European Progressive Studies and from the Max van der Stoel Foundation, and I'm here with Kido, who will take over now for the next part.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a collective responsibility to keep a finger on the pulse of the community. You do need it? Ah, you're recording with the microphone? Okay. One is enough?
Yeah.
I got it. So, the check-in, there's more to say about it, and we will give you a handout at the end, so you also have some more reference. But when you boil it down, we're going to give you a few tips, and then you're going to practice with somebody in the room, just to give it a start and to understand what it is and isn't. So we put in a few do's and don'ts when it comes to a check-in with your activist community. So the first one is a don't. And that's what we showed at the beginning. Don't just always say, I'm fine. When people ask you how you're doing, you can also go first and say something about how you are doing, what your mood is, and why. So show some part of your humanity when somebody asks you. And it doesn't always have to be negative. I mean, I started at this conference saying to more and more people, well, actually, the world is on fire and it's pretty difficult sometimes. I mean, that is showing, and maybe somebody connects to it, and you can have a conversation that goes beyond policy. It goes also about what it does to you. But the mood can also be positive. Great. We just saw that Orban lost the elections. You know, like I actually feel quite empowered. That's also nice to share, and then you can reflect on that. So it's trying to share something more about your mood, about something specific that you're feeling. And then on the flip side of that is don't overdo it. Because of course in the community it's good to know how about each other, how you're doing, but you are also collectively going towards a goal that is not your person, but is about changing policy, about making progressive values real. So you don't immediately have to go into a session on the couch at the psychologist or psychiatric office, because that is not necessarily what the other person is waiting for. So there is kind of this balance, this middle, where you don't just simply say, I'm fine, you don't overdo it, but you start sharing a little bit more. And when you start doing that regularly, and people start asking it regularly, you get much more of a sense of how the community is doing, and you can start signaling whether you need to maybe invest a little bit in each other's mental well-being, because we know it's at risk. Now, this is when somebody asks you, but on the other side, of course, you should also start asking other people, and maybe not being satisfied with just saying, I'm fine. So, when people, when you start asking others, try, when people share how they're doing, to listen, to empathize, and to acknowledge. A check-in is not, again, a psychiatric session. So don't immediately start fixing the problem for the person you're talking to. This is what politicians are expected to do. What is your solution for housing? What is your solution for social injustice? What is your solution for this? Of course, politicians will want to fix whatever you say if it's not going right, but try, as a member of the community, human to human, to not fix it immediately, because probably what you're saying is not exactly what the person needs anyway, but to listen, empathize, and acknowledge. And also, try not to make it about you. A lot of what happens in our brain when somebody says, oh, I feel a little bit troubled with what's going on in my city, to immediately say, oh, I have that too, I recognize it, I had it the other day, but now you're making what the other person is sharing about you. Try first to be a bit patient, maybe ask one follow-up question, try to say, I see, and let the person, after a bit of silence, maybe expand a little bit themselves. So it's trying to be a bit more patient. This is not a check-in about work, about a to-do list. It's a check-in where you try to see and listen to the human side of the activist in your community. So this is a tool that is used by Amnesty. We didn't come up with it ourselves. We are facilitators here. We will give you later on a handout that you will use for the second thing to read more. But we're just going to practice with these simple do's and don'ts. And what I'm going to ask you to do is find one other person. I think we are... Jana, would you join? Because then we have an even number. One other person that you share at least one language with. So where you're comfortable in speaking. Oh, there is a backup person to make the number of people even again. So find one person. If you need to just stand up, and we give you about 5 minutes to practice with these do's and don'ts about a check-in, where you try to open up a bit more than normal. Don't overdo it. All right? And then we're going to ask you how that is. So practice makes perfect. The more often you do it, the easier it is to do in real life. So we're just going to start practicing today. So find a conversation partner and we're going to check in with each other. Anyway, you just arrived, but I think you're getting the message. Okay, excellent. I guess two of you, maybe if either of you would like to stand up to form a pair. If the two of you could be together, I think we are fixed. So we take about 5 minutes from now, and we wish you a good time with practicing the check-in.
Ja.
Ja?
Ja, wel goed. Ja. Nee, een beetje teleurgesteld momenteel dat er zo weinig mensen zijn natuurlijk, maar ik ben er voor de rest wel blij vandaag. Het is echt wel leuk om weer terug te zijn en zoveel mensen te zien, een paar jaar niet te zien. En dat er gewoon, dat je nog steeds overal rondloopt en denkt van, hé, jou heb ik jou ken ik.
Ja.
En even bij kletsen. Dus daar ben ik.
De teleurstelling gaat het niet overschaduwen.
Nee, daar ben ik zo mee over. Dus het gaat wel een beetje afhangen van of we nou input krijgen. Zeg maar als mensen nou gewoon lekker een beetje meekletsen, dan gaat het zo prima.
Met de microfoon? Heeft die check-in gerelateerd? Of niet? Moeten ze de microfoon gebruiken?
Nee, ik zou het eigenlijk voor de safety zelf zeggen dat het niet best is. Maar
Zeker met het ding bij de hoeftuin. Okay.
nee.
Wat goed, dankjewel voor het delen.
Ja,
Ja. De wereld staat in de fik, hè?
ja, dus die had eigenlijk ook veel trouwens. Ja.
Nee, het is prima. We hebben een hele, echt intens drukke week gehad met heel veel verschillende dingen. Dus het feit dat ik nu een hele dag ergens ben met een soort van een redelijk consistent geheel is nog redelijk schakelen van, oh ja. Maar tegelijkertijd herken ik heel erg wat jij zegt van om mensen tegen te komen die je kent, maar ook met wie je bepaalde idealen deelt.
Ja.
De bedoeling is natuurlijk dat het een beetje een familiegevoel is. En daar ben ik wel gevoelig voor. Maar ik merk wel dat ik dat met een aantal mensen heb. Dus dat is
Gewoon leuk is. Ja,
heel positief.
Ja, en ik ga dan ook wel weer overwegen van, nou, misschien moet ik toch wel iets meer weer wat in de movement terug zijn. Zo.
Ja.
Dus ik zit toch wel weer een beetje aan. Kijk, misschien moeten weer eens langsgaan bij pro. Dus dat soort dingen. Hoewel ik geen fan ben van
Ja, ik vind hem prima. Ik heb er niet heel sterke gevoelens.
Ik ga even kijken of zij mee willen doen.
Ja, ik weet niet wie dit zijn. Eigenlijk. Alright, 1 minute left. 1 minute check-in left. All right. This marks the end of the short exercise. And the question, of course, now is this is one time. Maybe you've done it already. I just want to see if, when you think about the do's and don'ts, if it delivers anything beyond what you're used to in understanding how the other person is actually doing, and also whether you found it easy or hard to stay away from talking about plans or politics or how you are or solving it, and staying a little bit more in the active listening mode. So what was the experience? Anyone? this is fantastic. You're mentioning things that we were speaking about beforehand. So when it comes to being an activist and fighting these things as like the main purpose of your life, kind of, we will mention something about it in the next exercise. And when it comes to you want to go deep and really understand like what is it doing to you, a check-in is this short moment where you can signal this. So if that is what comes out, I would recommend as a member of the community working together and maybe working together for a longer time to say, hey, how about we have a coffee sometimes? And then you go deep because then you know it's actually the purpose of doing it. So this check-in taught you exactly what you need to know. You know, maybe this person needs a bit of extra attention from you. Otherwise, maybe you lose an activist in the community. So it's a really good example. So thank you for the feedback. And I completely have the same thing. I want to immediately go deep, and also I very much want to give suggestions. And this is the moment where you temporize, you do it a bit slower, and then you make an action choice afterwards. Any other experience?
Let me maybe
Oh,
add,
sorry. Yeah.
no, that's yeah. Let me add to that I think actually the fact that you are trying to understand more and see why that is already a pretty good reaction, right? Because you acknowledge at least that it's a valid emotion to feel, and you don't immediately go to saying, well, but maybe if you just like, you know, take a moment away and then you'll feel good again, or maybe we should meet some other people and then you'll do. That's kind of like telling people, oh, well, just fix your feeling. Makes them feel less seen than what you did, because you're making them feel like, okay, so this is something I can feel. It's okay to feel this, and I can share this. So I think that's already pretty good.
Yeah. Any other additional experiences that you want to share? Yes, sir.
Yes, at first this method checking sounds quite negative, right? A harmful impression of mental health. But actually it doesn't have to be negative. It can also be positive experiences, right?
It's positive or negative. Yeah, absolutely. So what did you share? Did you share something positive?
No, but I was talking with Robert, and Robert just moved here 8 months ago. He's super happy of being here. And as of having had the experience of the immigration myself, it feels like very fulfilling to see someone with optimism, someone with such a good experience. Like, feels good.
Yeah. And in this short conversation, you go way beyond the automatic fine. You actually learn something about the person, and it makes you happy, right? So it's also it's a way of checking in on a human level, which is much more rich than just doing it on the automatic level or the business level. Working on this, doing that, going here. No, how are you doing? And this is a very uplifting example. Any additional points that you want to mention based on this? Okay, this is just dipping. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's the line there? Because like you say, bad experience, lots of times happens.
Yeah. So, well, there's. Oh, you want to go first? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think from my experience, the line is where instead of empathizing with them, you're now turning the conversation and asking them to empathize with you. So if Keto tells me, oh, actually, like he just said, shared with all of you, there's actually quite a lot of going on in the world, and that sometimes is quite overwhelming. Then if I make it about me, I will say basically, oh, but I know exactly how you feel, because, you know, last week I couldn't even get out of bed, and then I had to actually call people, and they had to come help me, and now he has to help me instead of the other way around, right? Whereas what you do and say, I identify with that, and that kind of validates feelings, and it doesn't, without making it about you, right? You're just saying, okay, I understand this because this is something that I face too, without sharing that you're doing even worse, or asking him to empathize with you.
And as a very practical tip, if you are the person who has this inclination to do that, which I also recognize, by the way, which I'm doing it now, is to build in for yourself one step in between, which is a pause, like, and then the person may expand, and then at least you have a little bit more of you don't need to put that in between, but if you know that you usually are inclined to jump on it, build in the pause, and then say, I see how you feel, I recognize it. So that is a nice, during a check-in, where you want to make the time a little bit more about the person you're checking in with, is a way to do it. And then during a check-in, the tables will turn, and then they will ask you, and that's also an opportunity to share how you are matching their energy. So this is, we're going into the finer details, but in the meantime, Jana is handing out the second part, which is, I didn't catch your name, unfortunately, but this is also very much what we just spoke about. If you notice that something is going wrong with the person or with yourself, it's also important to signal that early, and there are some tools and levels of understanding of what to do about it, which are very practical and very useful. So this is the second part, and Jana, take over from here.
Let me give you one too. Yeah. All right. So we wanted to share with you two types of tools. One, like the check-in just now, that has been used a lot as a tool to create space for discussing mental health in activist communities. So you do it with each other. Right? The other tool that we want to share with you is about self-care, and that's what we just handed out, this handout for as well. So what we want to share with you is one more practical exercise, a more individual exercise that can help you take care of your own mental health. So self-care is built on a lot of psychological insights about how we deal with stress, and that comes from and it has some pretty hands-on practical solutions for trying and seeing how you can build healthy habits that make you more resilient, that make you better able to cope with the stress that you experience during your activism, or potentially also at work, at home, at school, etc. And this is a handout that we're borrowing from Amnesty International. And what they do with their activists is discuss how to make sure that activism doesn't take over your entire life and identity. Because what we know from psychology is that in social identity theory, if you identify very much with, for example, being a climate activist, or being a socialist activist, or being a feminist, or whatever your cause is, when that becomes a part of your identity, it's something you care about a lot, right? And so you'll do really well when the cause is doing well, and when you achieve victories, when you win elections, when you pass new laws that mitigate climate change, you'll be perfectly fine, right? But if it's not going so well, right? If you see climate change isn't being mitigated at all, isn't being stopped, when you see that a genocide in Gaza is ongoing and that we all just watch, if that is so deeply ingrained in your identity, it also very directly negatively affects your mental health. And so what we try to do in social psychology is try to see if you can find alternative sources of identity as well. Other, for example, friends that you have outside of activism that you can rely on to look at a different part of yourself. Hobbies outside. So we have here an overview of different self-care routines, and the routines have to do with building habits that make you more able to cope with these stresses and that keep that activism from being the only thing you care about. Because letting that be the only thing you care about leads to this vicious circle. So there's a couple of things in here, for example, that are physical habits that have to do with just taking care of your body and particularly your mind. So exercising, sleeping well enough, eating healthy. You've all heard of these before, probably, right? But there's also emotional boundaries, like making sure that you take care of any trauma that you experienced during your activism, that you develop skills to say no also, to allow yourself to not always go to protests, to maybe skip one, to indicate boundaries to your fellow activists. mental habits that can help you. For example, things like journaling can help you process the things that you see in your activism. And growth, what you see here in the last part, is something that's built on trying to anchor yourself outside of the movement as well. So think about other identities that you can build. For example, through sports, through friends that are entirely disconnected from your activism, setting goals, so what you want to achieve, things that lead you to spend more time outside of that movement. And of course, you can never do them all, right? That just becomes more pressure. But it is something that we use to try and think about, like, what do you do to actually invest in your own care? What do you do to make sure that you keep yourself healthy and don't give all of your energy and attention and care to the movement alone? And so we'd like you to see if you can fill in what your self-care routine is. Maybe you already have some habits that you're using. Maybe there's some that you want to develop. And so on the second page of this handout, you see this brain, which makes it very topical for a FEPS workshop. And we're going to ask you to spend a few minutes to see if you can fill some of those things in. Right? So what do you do what healthy habits do you have, for example, for physical exercise? Do you do sports? Do you do that regularly? What do you do for your mental health, your emotional health? Do you have other goals in life outside of activism that you try to grow in? So take a moment, fill it in, and then we'll discuss what comes out.
Does somebody need a pen?